points of agreement and convergence on which we can work together. This legislation is built on 4 key ideas, each of which can be traced back to effective components of current programs or initiatives, and all of which could be considered central to any attempt to reform the safety net. Given that at its essence, our work is about the people in need in communities across this country, shouldn't the system be designed to serve them and treat them as the individuals they are? So we need individual opportunity plans for those living in poverty, based on the concept of individualized education plans which are tailored to the unique needs of a child. Individual opportunity plans would be created with the assistance of client advocates to ensure that all poverty relief efforts are individualized. As you all know, the needs of the people you see every day are vastly different. We need to recognize that in our approach to service delivery and to act accordingly. Doesn't it also seem to make sense that local communities should have control over their own approach to poverty? Just as a solution for one individual may not work for another, Fort Worth's solutions to local poverty may be vastly different from what works in rural Maine. Just as we see in the Emergency Food and Shelter Program, local communities should have the flexibility to decide how to implement their own poverty relief services. As we watch the growing struggle around national funding for social service programs, it is becoming increasingly important that we not only identify, but incentivize innovative funding streams to our programs as well. Twin Cities Rise in St. Paul, Minneapolis, uses a unique funding model that quantifies the amount of money Minnesota government saves when their job placement programs are successful, and then returns that money to the program by way of a payment from the state. If we are to be successful in our mission, we must be utilizing this type of idea and creativity across the country. And just as we see in our nation's approach to disaster response, we must utilize waivers in our poverty relief efforts. The success of disaster relief is found in the ability to respond to the specific needs of families and individuals made possible at that time by federal waivers. These waivers ensure that the limited resources at our disposal can be focused to the precise area of need. Poverty is not a natural disaster. It is one of our own making, but it too could benefit from the ability to focus resources where they are most needed. While these 4 key ideas could be pivotal to reforming our safety net, we must also be conscious of the fact that this reform must not be done in a context that is devoid of our commitments to humanity. We must recognize the need to remain committed to guarantees of basic human necessity. So we must consider things like the establishment of hunger-free communities and a hold harmless clause to protect the vulnerable from efforts to use reform as an opportunity to simply reduce the reach of the already frayed safety net. Now, I don't expect that after today, everyone in this room will be working on passing the National Opportunity and Community Renewal Act. But this set of principles is one that we should champion. These ideas are not ethereal. We know they have worked in other applications, and we have seen their impressive results. But I would say, if you disagree, then I would ask you, what will work? If you don't agree with these ideas, then now is the time to speak up and put forward what you think will work, because maintaining the status quo is simply unacceptable. Too many people are relying on us to come up with the bold answers that will forever change their lives. Because if it's not us, then who will? More and more, we hear the cynical viewpoint that people on the edge of society need to simply pull themselves up from their bootstraps, that if they really wanted to get out of poverty, they would just have to work harder to do so. This prevailing mindset is not only unhelpful, it's ineffective and it's dishonest. And it makes our work here today even more difficult. What limited national conversation does take place on the issue of poverty is completely without ethical underpinning. We live in the richest country in the world, even with our deficit challenges, and yet the vast majority of the country is content to go to bed at night without thought for the 1 out of every 6 Americans that are struggling to simply get by. That has to change, and it's up to us to change it. But even with the collective commitment of all those in this room, we can only do so much. Even by refocusing on innovative ideas and national reforms to better meet the needs of individuals, we will still fall short. Because it can't just be Catholic Charities USA or Bread for the World. It can't just be the 600 people who attended the first annual National Poverty Summit. It can't even just be every nonprofit in the United States of America. If we don't engage our nation's business leaders, if we don't engage our country's leading academics, if we don't engage local, state, and federal government, we will fail. Because if we aren't all moving forward together, we aren't moving at all. I come here today from Washington, D.C., a city that I am proud to work in, a city of incredible import, a city that tens of millions of Americans visit every year. They come to see the White House, the halls of Congress, the Supreme Court. They walk the hallowed marbled halls of wonderful institutions, looking to feel the inspiration those that built them must have felt, the inspiration of those that first made this country great. But as we look for inspiration to help us on this difficult path that is ahead of us, I think we would be better served to cross the National Mall and quietly observe the memorials to Franklin D. Roosevelt and Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., to contemplate President Roosevelt's famous words, "The test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have too little." Or to look upon his address to a distressed nation in October of 1932, and I quote, "In these days of difficulty, we Americans everywhere must and shall choose a path of social justice, the path of faith, the path of hope, the path of love toward our fellow man." End of quote. And as we walk that path of faith and hope and love, let us also remember the poetic words of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. "If you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. Say that I was a drum major for righteousness, and all of the other shallow things will not matter." My friends, I am here today to tell you that we must all be drum majors in this fight together. We must all be drum majors in our quest to restore the greatness of this country. Tens of millions of Americans are counting on us, so let the drums begin.